Okay, sir. Good evening, Miss Deborah. Need her button. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Miss Nancy. Hi, Miss Bethany from Utah. Hello, hello. My reading break was good. In fact, I think I'm going to make that a regular practice. Like, once I finish a story, I'm going to take a week off. If anything, just because my voice really needs it, but... Right, Hoobie? Hello, Cassandra from Texas. How are you this evening? I hope everybody's having a good week so far. I know it's only Tuesday, but, you know. Oh, you're a teacher. Bless you, Miss Cassandra. Good Lord, I bet you are tired. Lipstick on my arm? It's not from you, is it, Kat? No? Okay. Oh, it's going to take a lot to burn me out, trust me, so. All right. Come here, buddy. Oh. So just like always, we're going to give it till about 8:05 for people to log on. But for those who don't know, we are reading from... shiny. We are reading from Leonardo's Swans this time around. Yes, you should go on a spa vacation. You absolutely should. My mom was an educator for many years, and any break that you can take it. You guys deserve it, for sure. So, but yes, we're reading from Leonardo's Swans, and this is by Karen Essex. And so basically the story is going to be following primarily two sisters, Isabella and her sister Beatrice. And so we are in Renaissance era Italy. And we are basically going to be watching these two young women who are from high class society. We're basically going to watch them battle it out to see which can be the better sister, who can out society the other. I love this book because there is a ton of there's a lot of historical information in here about the time, about societal class, about dress, about etiquette, things about trade and politics. I love this book because it's so personal, but it's so informative, and I think these two girls are going to be very relatable to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, even though they're from a completely different time. And, society was just very different back then, but societal pressure is societal pressure. And I think we're going to feel the sting of it very keenly with these two girls. So, I hope you guys enjoy this book as much as I do. Just before we get started, though, can I get some indication that you guys can hear me well enough? Hearts, thumbs ups, comments, anything. Can you hear me all right? I assume you probably can, but I like to check just before I get started reading. Okay. Excellent. Perfect. Okay. So, 8:06. We're going to get started. Okay. Prologue. In the year 1506, in French-occupied Milan, Isabella spreads her arms like angel's wings over her sister's cold marble form, running her fingers down the exquisitely carved folds of her burial gown and tracing the delicate veins in her hands. Next to Beatrice, the exiled duke, Ludovico, lies as if in repose, though he is in fact still alive, breathing the dank, foul air of a French prison. Isabella must be careful to lavish her grief only on the figure of Beatrice, face so serene upon the pillow of stone, and neglect that of the Duke, now out of favor. Isabella knows that from the rear of the church eyes are pointed like daggers at her back, ready to report that her vow to be a good Frenchwoman is false. Kneeling, she presses hot, curled lips onto the cheeks of Beatrice's death mask and whispers, "So, my sister, it is true what we always joked, that once you had given birth to a few children, you would be as fat as mother, only 21 at the time of your death, and yet they told me you had taken to wearing vertical stripes to disguise your weight. Still, I did not dream that you could have aged so much so quickly, and to think, for so long I considered you the lucky one. Who could have predicted that such a turn of events? Did you see from your crypt how the horrors of the French soldiers made off with all 400 of your spectacular gowns? The thousands of gems and pearls so delicately sewn and artfully placed have been torn off, I imagine, to buy a potion to end some slut's unwanted pregnancy, or to treat a nasty canker, or to put food in a whore's soon-to-be toothless mouth. These few years later, the dresses I so coveted are cast aside, filthy and frayed, and you are dust. Ah, but at least you were buried still clutching a tiny portion of your innocence. You did not live to see the things I have seen, or to make the impossible decisions I have had to make, or to turn your back on those you love to survive their foolish choices. Remember our parlor games? You were always the winner, so clever at scartino, surprising everyone with your moves and taking the purse. I have been playing a similar game, though every move has to be made with great care. I have chilled my own blood with some of my decisions. Beatrice, I am a figure on a chessboard of poison, where the players change from black to white and back without notice. Remember the elaborate system of trumps at which you were so adept, with which you, giggling hysterically, won game after game of cards. There is a new dimension to the landscape now that neither you nor your Duke anticipated. But I did. France trumps Italy, and that is that. If Fortuna had not been so fickle, so remiss in the proper arranging of things, and our roles had been reversed, if I had had it my way, would I be lying in your grave? Or would the course of history have been changed? How is it conceivable that your illustrious husband, whose attention I craved, wastes away in a French prison with only a copy of the Divine Comedy and a pet dwarf to give him solace? Wouldn't you love to know whose face he tries to conjure as he falls asleep on his lice-ridden bed of straw? Which sister? Which mistress? Poor Ludovico. He doesn't even have Magistro Leonardo's images of his lovers to console him now. My own match of wills with Leonardo has continued. I wonder if you hadn't reached out from the grave, Beatrice, to meddle with my ambitions. Without your interference, and with the power I hold over his new patron, I should have concluded my business with Leonardo by now. I have pledges from the artist himself, but you know what a promise from Leonardo is worth. Sometimes I think he is the most adept player of us all, and yet there are whispers that I might receive satisfaction from him on this very evening. Wouldn't that be lovely, my sister? Then you and I might both rest. The bell in the tower rings the 5 o'clock hour. I would love to stay with you past the twilight time. I remember that you do not like to be left alone in the dark. But I must go dress for yet another of King Louis's balls, where we shall all convene in the very rooms where you once lived, in the service of the new master, carefully avoiding any mention of the past, including yourself. Adieu, my love. Remember how we hated to speak the French language. One must speak it all the time now. The bells have stopped chiming, and Isabella imagines that her attendants grow impatient with the visit. Still, she finds that she does not wish to leave. She stands caressing Beatrice's peaceful visage one more time, touching her stony locks and nestling a warm cheek against her sister's cold, chiseled one. Beatrice, Beatrice, it's not that I didn't love you. You were like the swans in your pond, born awkward and ugly, maturing into beauty, bringing magic into the world, and singing at the hour of your death. You mythical creature, who on earth or above could have not loved you. It's just that for so long I imagined that you had stolen my destiny, when all the while, unbeknownst to us, you were preserving it for me. Chapter 1. From the Book of Leonardo. When fortune comes, seize her firmly at the forelock, for I tell you, she is bald at the back. In the year 1489, in the city of Ferrara. She grew up in a land of fairy tales and miracles. That is what Isabella is explaining to Francesco as they ride through Ferrara's streets. It is Christmas time, and though there is no snow on the dry stone road, the horses shoot clouds of steam into the frigid air through their nostrils. This is the first time she has been allowed to escort her fiancé through the city on one of his visits. Francesco Gonzaga, future Marquis of Mantua, has come to Ferrara to romance his soon-to-be bride, and to enjoy the city's many Christmas pageants ordered by Isabella's father, Duke Ercole d'Este, a great patron of the theatre. Isabella believes that the more she tells Francesco of Ferrara's secrets and wonders, and the more she shows him of her father's spectacular building projects and improvements, the more he will realize her value. Hell yeah, brother! What's up, Julie? In this very church, In this very church, Isabella says, pointing to St. Mary's of the Ford, almost 200 years ago on Easter Sunday, the priest broke the Eucharist in two, and flesh and blood came spraying forth, covering the walls of the church and splattering the entire flock. The parishioners watched in awe, Isabella says, eyes wide with drama. The Bishop of Ferrara and the Archbishop of Ravenna came to see it. They instantly recognized it as the body and blood of Christ and declared it a true miracle of the Eucharist. Francesco solemnly makes the sign of the cross as they ride past the church, but his eyebrows arch skeptically, making him look entirely out of step with the act. Beatrice trots ahead of the pair of lovers, her long braids swinging in saucy rhythm with a horse's mane, as uninterested as her steed in their conversation. "Isn't that right, Beatrice?" Isabella asks her sister for a confirmation of her story, hoping that the odd girl does not say anything to contradict her. Beatrice is a puzzle to Isabella, a fact that the older sister blames on the girl's unsupervised upbringing in wild Naples. The girl is a feral, unformed thing, alternately shy, naive, aloof, and bold, the latter especially apparent when riding or hunting. How such a small 14-year-old girl, who is not particularly courageous outside of these activities, excels at all manly sports is a mystery to Isabella, but the fact of Beatrice's prowess remains, no matter how enigmatic. "I wouldn't know. I wasn't there," Beatrice finally answers without turning around, but they can hear her laugh at her own joke. The animal's swaying ass taunts Isabella, who knows that her sister is dying to break away from them to test the horse's speed. Francesco has brought Drago, the pure white Spanish charger, from his family's stud farm on the island of Tejeto, as a gift for the girl's father. But Beatrice immediately took over the animal, talking to him in whispers that should be reserved for a lover, and hopping upon him and riding away, as if the painstakingly bred horse was meant to carry a little girl in a pink riding dress, and not meant for a fearsome knight in armor. "I'll tell you a miracle that happened right here in Ferrara that is even better," Francesco says, sidling his horse right up to Isabella's, so that their legs touch. She knows she should pull away, that her mother would rail against this sort of indiscriminate physical contact, even with leather riding boots providing a barrier to the couple's much-craved intimacy, but instead she rides with slow care so that they might continue to brush against one another. "What miracle is that?" she asks, suppressing a smile. "That your father agreed that you should be my wife," he answers. "You have no idea just how miraculous," she thinks. If the timing had been slightly different, he would be marrying the jaunty girl riding ahead of them, but this he does not know. When the marriage agreements were made 9 years ago, Isabella was only 6 and Beatrice 5. Who could have cared at the time which sister married what man, as long as both marriages were politically expedient for the city-state of Ferrara. Isabella wants to tell him the story, but she would need him to say that if things had worked out differently, his life would have been a ruin, and he cannot possibly say that in front of Beatrice. Duchess Leonora had long ago drummed into her daughters' heads that marriage between noble houses was no whimsical arrangement based on ephemeral qualities of preference or attraction. The peace of Italy depended on these unions, especially at this juncture. The Venetians had become doubly aggressive since the Turks pushed them out of Constantinople. They began to push farther and farther inland into Italy because they needed land for their farms and their citizens. They hired condottieri to take over towns, Verona, Padua, and Vicenza, all near Ferrara. The Venetians wanted complete control over the trade routes and the rivers, as well as the land. Ferrara was venerable and strong, but small. For her to remain independent, she must have strong alliances with the city-states of Mantua and Milan. You girls are ambassadors of Ferrara. Its welfare depends upon the successes of your marriages. Therefore, you must do nothing to endanger these alliances. You must do nothing prior to the marriages that may cause the families to renege on the commitments. Your behavior must be impeccable. You are as much the protectors of Ferrara's welfare as our army or our treasury. You are, in fact, its greatest treasures. And when you enter your husband's houses, I expect you to act like it. Your bodies are the very bindings that will hold us all together and stave off conflicts and wars. Do not think that you can behave like the women in fairy tales and poetry. The Duke and I will not tolerate it. Looking at Francesco now, Isabella thinks that she must be the most fortunate of women. Her fiancé is not handsome, but he has rugged qualities that give an ugly man appeal. Already 23, he will never be tall, and his eyes bulge, a condition that she knows will worsen over time. Because she has seen old men with this affliction, and they look like reptiles. Yet he is as solidly built as any man alive, and his courtly manners contrast so thrillingly with the wicked look in his protruding brown eyes. Besides being from one of the oldest noble families in Italy, he already is considered a brilliant student of warfare, destined for an illustrious career in the military arts. Undoubtedly, he will lead one of Italy's great armies to many victories. Isabella feels that Francesco is the perfect man to help her realize her destiny, which is to have a powerful husband and reign with him over a great and enlightened realm. Beatrice, riding 3 lengths in front of them, begins to pick up speed. She turns her head to the side, giving the lovers a sprightly profile, before dashing off with the horse. "We had better follow her," Francesco says, a look of grave concern coming over his face. "That will not be easy," as Isabella replies. Isabella does not like to see any interest in her sister from her betrothed, though she cannot imagine why. With her exceptional qualities, she should not worry one bit. But worry she does. Francesco is from a family famous for breeding horses. Nothing arouses the passions of the Gonzagas of Mantua like a great horse, or a rider who can handle one. Beatrice looks back one more time before guiding Drago through one of the city's grand arched portals to a road where she can ride faster. Francesco takes up the challenge and speeds after her on his dark stallion, the jewels in his silver saddle catching just enough of the winter sun to sparkle. Isabella follows, but at a slower pace. It would be extremely unladylike for her to compete with her boyish sister in this game for Francesco's attention. Besides, she does not want to sweat so badly under her new habit that she will be embarrassed later, when, helping her descend from the steed, Francesco will take her small hand and slyly raise it to his lips. Let Beatrice dismount in her typical disheveled state, damp, stringy hairs hanging from about her face, and oozing sweat like the horses she rides into the ground. Isabella settles into a steady canter as the two race ahead of her, first Francesco taking the lead, then Beatrice gaining on him, so close that it looks from this distance as if she is trying to make her horse bite his stallion's rear end. If one is to look upon the two sisters objectively, as Isabella prays Francesco does, one has to observe Isabella's advantages. Isabella has spent all her life at her distinguished mother's knee, while Beatrice, from the ages of 2 to 10, was left behind at the court of Naples all the way on the other side of Italy as a peace offering to their grandfather, King Ferrante, whom everyone feared and hated, but who had taken an instant liking to Beatrice. Isabella reads Latin impeccably, and can recite Virgil's eclogues, to the satisfaction of her tutors and her father's eminent guests. Beatrice, on the other hand, has spent the 4 years since her return to Ferrara being pushed to catch up with her sister in their studies. She can barely spell. She can recite a poem or two in Latin, but Isabella doubts that she has any idea of what she is saying. Isabella plays musical instruments and sings like an angel. Beatrice loves music, but must be sung to. Isabella has studied rhetoric and mathematics, and can take either side in an argument over at least one Platonic dialogue. Beatrice enjoys poetry, but prefers that others read it to her. Isabella is the loveliest dancer in all of Ferrara, turning her head elegantly this way and that. Not only does she have the correct timing, style, and balance necessary for the art, she also knows where just to place her smile as she turns, dips, and lowers her head, eyes lingering on their specific target until the lids fall modestly in time with the music. Beatrice manages at dance, but is no match for her graceful sibling. Isabella has read all of the books in her father's library, and all of her mother's romance novels about the chivalric days of old. She has watched carefully as her parents commissioned and acquired paintings and other works of art from the most illustrious talents of the age. In addition to her intellectual accomplishments, Isabella has tumbling, long, blonde curls, large, wide-set black eyes, and a slender body. Beatrice shows signs of stoutness, with thick thighs and ankles, though only her sister, her servants, and her husband, should the man to whom she is engaged actually honor their betrothal, ever know this. She has a round face, a small, uninteresting nose, and dark hair that lacks luster, so much so that she must wear it in a long ponytail down her back. She prefers the outdoors to all pursuits. Oh, hey, Ishmael. It's okay that you're late, hun. Leonardo, Swans by Karen Essex. She is the kind of person Isabella would not find terribly interesting if she were not her sister. Isabella consistently outperforms Beatrice in all pursuits but this, the equestrian. Now, and in the presence of her betrothed, Isabella fears Beatrice is trying to make her pay for her crimes of superiority. Suddenly, Francesco stops, pulling in the animal, whipping him about so that he is facing Isabella. She realizes that he is looking for her, has stopped this competition with her sister because she has entered his mind, even in the midst of the wild ride. Beatrice, who has bolted ahead, also stops. No longer enjoying the ride without the competitive aspect, she trots back to him. Isabella hears Francesco say, "I wanted you to show me the city's newest improvements, not race me to your death." "You just don't want to lose to a woman," Beatrice retorts, flushed scarlet from her escapade, adjusting the velvet cap that she wears at a clever tilt. "Do you fail to remember that I was not losing?" he answers. "Settle down," Isabella says in Beatrice's direction, hoping that she does not sound too much like the admonishing older sister, the sour one who does not want to be a part of their game. "We are supposed to be showing him the city." "Be a good girl, or I am going to take Drago back home with me," Francesco says to Beatrice in a tone that conspires with Isabella's paternal attitude toward her sister. Beatrice clutches the reins close to her chest. "He wouldn't go. He would run away with me first." "Don't be too sure, little princess," he replies, sounding like a father. Thank God he considers her a child and Isabella a woman. Satisfied that she can recapture Francesco's attention with her more mature demeanor, Isabella leads them over the bridge and back inside the city walls. "Now, Beatrice, do listen to what I'm telling Francesco, so that when your betrothed comes to visit Ferrara, you might show him these same things." Beatrice groans. The subject is a sore one. Mistress once more of this little expedition, Isabella explains how the city of Ferrara has changed in recent years, how her father, the Duke, had gotten it into his mind to rebuild the city along the enlightened architectural guidelines set by Leon Battista Alberti, the Genoan. She explains, to demonstrate her knowledge of not only architecture, city planning, and mathematics, but political subtleties as well, how Ercole had sent to his ally Lorenzo the Magnificent in Florence for the 10 manuscripts of Alberti's De Reedifactoria, to set about modernizing his city and its buildings according to the great theorist's vision. Streets were widened into broad avenues. New structures were created with careful attention to classical values of proportion and harmony. Aesthetics were linked with and equal to the mathematical proportions of things. While all this construction had flown up around her, Isabella had felt that, along with the old-fashioned city of pointed arches and endless spires, life itself was spreading out in broader directions. Narrow streets, dark halls with low ceilings, and cramped corridors were things of the past. Lamps and candles illuminated rooms once kept dark. People were reading and talking in these well-lit drawing rooms late into the night. Ancient manuscripts, once the property of the church and private collectors alone, were being translated from Greek and Latin into Italian right here at Ferrara's University. And Venetian and Milanese printers were making copies of them and selling them all over the country. In the years after her father had defeated and executed his rivals and made peace with the Venetian Republic, the old Castello d'Este, with its famous 4 towers, was quickly transformed from fortress to grand residential palazzo. The soldiers, along with their weapons and artillery, were moved to the older, colder, more stern quarters, while the family and members of the court occupied the newer and more spacious halls and apartments, decorated with the works of the greatest artists of the decades, all of whom had passed through Ferrara in the service of the Este family: Pisanello, Piero della Francesca, the Venetian Jacopo Bellini, Cosimo Tura. Isabella points out to her beloved Francesco and her uninterested sister an example of the new architecture, the Palazzo de Diamante, the residence named after her father's sobriquet, the diamond. You probably did. This book came out in, let's see, 2006. Yeah, this book came out and it was published in 2006. 12,000 diamond shapes jut into the air from the palazzo's ominous facade. Whew. Not exactly a subtle reminder of Duke Ercole's omniscient power over Ferrara, but an effective one. Do they call him the diamond because he is worth so much? Francesco asks. It's because he's thin and sinewy and his body is cut in hard lines, Beatrice pipes in, suddenly part of the conversation. It's because in negotiations, he's as hard as the hardest rock, Isabella says, something your family undoubtedly found out when they negotiated our marriage contract. I think he made a terrible deal for himself, Francesco replies. Why? Isabella asks, now wishing to defend her father. Because you are priceless, that's why. If you were my daughter, I would know that you were too good for any man. Beatrice skewers her face at Francesco in mock disgust over his syrupy lover's comment. You probably stole that from some bad poet, she says. Or a stable boy courting a kitchen maid, Isabella teases. It would not do to let Francesco know how deeply his every word affects her. Beatrice looks restless. Isabella watches her sister's eyes scan the city walls as if she is looking for an escape. Isabella gets jittery when she sees this mood descend over the younger girl. She can tell by the sudden, secretive smile and the darting eyes that Beatrice has found a new surprise and is searching for just the right moment to reveal it. Beatrice is often predictable in her unpredictability. Isabella tries to distract her sister by beginning a new conversation. My father's latest project is to rebuild the city walls, she says, gesturing to the towering red brick fortifications, decorated with hand-carved medallions of the city's symbols, and the crests and portraits of the illustrious members of the ruling Este family from days gone by. At the top are wide footpaths. You can see all the way out into the countryside, beyond the Po River. If you like, you can circle the entire city. Or anticipate an invader, which is more likely what your father had in mind, Francesco adds. You men with your military minds, Isabella says, flashing him a smile that lets him know that she is saying it with admiration. Before she can bring her lips back together, the thing that Isabella has anticipated and feared begins. Beatrice breaks from the other two, pulls back her horse's head, and eggs him on up the brick stairs that lead to the top of the city walls. Isabella would like to simply be annoyed at her attention-seeking sister, but the problem is twofold. First, one is not allowed to take horses to the top of the wall. Second, and perhaps more serious, the project is not yet finished. Great gaping holes leave the brick walkways disconnected, but Beatrice is not one to think on these things. She is not particularly observant, nor does she plan ahead. Duke Ercole's sentries on the wall's top tier anticipate the runaway rider, ready to apprehend the unruly person, until they recognize the Duke's daughter. Everyone knows that she spent too many years with her indulgent grandfather in faraway Naples. Without the watchful eye of her mother to restrain her, the girl was allowed to run wild, much to the king's amusement. It was said everywhere that the mean old man encouraged the girl in her antics, much the way that little boys tease their dogs until they bite. So that when the sentries realize it is just Beatrice, they shake their heads and jump out of her way, one even bowing as she rides by as if inviting her passage. Isabella knows that they assume, as does Francesco, that Beatrice will give little performance for her companions below and then come down. Isabella knows her sister better. Beatrice looks down at the astonished Francesco, taunting him by taking off her little cap and tossing it in his direction. "Remember me!" she cries. Then she cracks her leather whip on the horse's flank and is gone. When the sentries realize where she is headed, and at what breakneck speed, they abandon their posts, futilely running after her on foot. "Beatrice, stop!" calls Isabella. The girl hears her, she is sure, but only looks down once with a fast and gloating glance to see that she is leaving the others behind. Isabella kicks her own beast, racing along the walls to catch up with Beatrice. Isabella imagines her sister's big, round face freezing into a circle of panic when the girl sees what is ahead. The wall comes to an end, dropping off many feet below where a few bricklayers work lazily in the cold from wooden scaffolds. Perhaps 10 feet of empty space separates the new path from the old. Isabella anticipates the calamity and prays that her sister sees the danger. She does not quite like or understand this untamed creature, spoiled by too many years of Neapolitan splendor, untempered by parental discipline, but she does not want to see her hurt. Beatrice, long, flowing brown plait is flying behind her like a kite, makes no motion to bring in the beast, but pushes him on, faster and faster toward the crevasse. Francesco and Isabella both scream madly for her to stop, but the girl either no longer hears them over the sound of her horse's hooves on the uneven bricks, or she does hear, but is out of her mind, possessed by some demon that causes mental disease, something that Isabella has considered about her before. The desperate sentries chase after the Duke's daughter, and the others keep yelling her name louder and with increasing horror. Beatrice's elbows pump wildly as if she believes she can fly over the great gap in the wall. Like a creature in a fairy tale suddenly transforming into a bird, she leaps into the air on her animal's back, and he, like Pegasus, flies beneath her. Her body is aloft, high above the seat, as the horse stretches its length, trying to please the will of its rider. The animal's natural stride is impossibly short to gap the distance, and Isabella wants to turn her eyes away to avoid seeing Beatrice tumble down the wall, the horse falling upon her and crushing her to death. But something about the way that her sister seems to float above the animal, relieving it of her weight, forces her to keep watching. Francesco is now making the sign of the cross with the heavy silver crucifix he wears at his neck in utter earnestness and is calling upon his God. But Beatrice does not need divine intervention. The horse's front legs close the distance, hitting hard the bricks of the old pathway. Before Isabella can feel any relief, she sees that the animal's back legs are slipping down the gap. The horse scrambles to achieve balance, his hind legs churning as if he is trying to turn them into wheels. It looks for a moment as if the animal and girl might careen backward down the wall and onto the bricklayers who, instead of leaping from the scaffolds to their own deaths, or at least to broken bones, hunch over, hands on their heads, try to protect themselves from the inevitable. But Beatrice, unfazed, yells, "Oh, come on!" and pushes the animal, against all laws of motion, up the craggy wall and onto the footpath. Triumphant, laughing, she looks back at her two companions, gives a little cock of the head, and rides away. Isabella, breathless, heart pounding, turns to Francesco, expecting him to share in her anger. Instead, he does not even try to hide an admiring smile. "Fearless," he says, watching the girl gallop toward the palace. If your father had waited a mere month to send his ambassadors to Ferrara, Beatrice would have been yours, and I would have been marrying Ludovico of Milan. Then Isabella adds coquettishly, though not without trepidation, "Would you have liked that?" Isabella and Francesco are standing in a small parlor in the castello where two portraits of the sisters are displayed side by side, waiting for Francesco's servants to pack Isabella's image in layers and layers of cloth for safekeeping through the journey back to Mantua. Isabella is scrutinizing Beatrice's portrait to see if there is anything Francesco might find more pleasing to his eye than in hers. If only I had a taste for plump little boys instead of exquisite beauties. Isabella is certain that Francesco should not be saying these kind of things to her before they are married, nor should she allow him to pass such an unflattering remark about her sister. But his words make a flutter in her stomach, erasing all feelings of impropriety. Besides, she had nothing to complain over. Her betrothed, this manly figure who is to inherit the title of Marquis of Mantua from his father, is here in Ferrara courting her, while Beatrice's affianced, Ludovico Sforza, who isn't even Duke of Milan, but regent to his young nephew, shows nothing but disinterest in their pending marriage. One of the purposes of Francesco's visit, besides enjoying the renowned Christmas pageants, was to bring Isabella's mother a painting she craved by Andrea Mantega, Mantua's court painter, and to collect the betrothal portrait by Cosimo Tura of the lovely Isabella. Cosimo had been commissioned to paint betrothal portraits of both sisters, though Ludovico has been too busy with his latest mistress to send an emissary to pick up the one of Beatrice. This, after Messer Giacomo Trotti, Ferrara's ambassador to Milan, had to embarrass him into commissioning the piece in the first place. Other gossip circulating Ferrara's court is that Ludovico had to be invoiced 3 times for the 4 florins owed the artist before he finally paid. Isabella had loved being painted, loved how the maestro's brushstrokes replicated her very essence. She loved being frozen in time at this precious moment, when her maidenhood was rapidly coming to an end. What magic it was to be able to halt fleeting time. Forever she would be remembered at this age, with her face and body and countenance in this state. Would that a portraitist could reproduce not only a physical being, but a singular moment, in this case, one in which she turned her face slightly to the left, but cast her eyes directly at the artist as if answering a question, was miraculous to her. If she could, she would be painted every day of her life to record her progress. She had prepared arduously for this sitting. Cosimo was an old man now, but famous for having painted the exquisite altarpiece at San Giorgio, in which the serene Blessed Virgin holds a sleeping Christ on her lap. Her eyes gaze gently downward at the angelic musicians playing celestial music for her pleasure. For Isabella, the painting had mysterious powers. Every time she attended Mass at the church with her family, her eyes remained riveted not to Our Lady, or to the winsome child, but to the color green that seemed to jump out of the painting and animate the wooden panel to life. The road to achieving all perfection in womanhood on earth and eternal bliss in heaven is paved by meditation on the sweet face of Our Lady, her mother assured her time and time again. Pleased that her daughter could not remove her eyes from the religious scene, but it was the composition and color scheme of the piece that intrigued Isabella. When she looked at the panel, she felt as if her ears were miraculously filled with saintly music. She could hear the lutes, trumpets, and chorus of voices, and she attributed this phenomenon to the life-giving powers of that strange green, which had not the verdant color of nature, but the radiance of jewels. Convinced of the color's magical properties, she had asked her mother to have her favorite Venetian silk dyer replicate the dress so that she would wear it to sit for Cosimo Tura's portrait. There is no need, Leonora had replied. The painter already knows how to reproduce the color. But Isabella argued until her mother went to her parsimonious father with the request, and their Venetian agent was sent a color sample, a small block of wood with a swash of the paint placed upon it by Cosimo himself. The fabric was produced and procured. Isabella had sat for Cosimo wearing the gown, which she accented with a brocade vest in the pinkish color also found in the upper reaches of the altarpiece, because she had so loved the contrast of the two colors. Her parents complained of her exacting tastes, but what did they expect? It is because I have been raised by two connoisseurs, she countered. The portraits further contrasted the sisters. Leonora had insisted that both girls wear their hair loose about the shoulders, like Neapolitan princesses, a look that was most attractive to men of all ages. But the coif only suited Isabella, whose blonde curls danced about her shoulders in springy coils, like little golden snakes, her father had said, curling one lock about his finger. It is as if our Lord, to make up for the sins and cruelty of the pagan gods, has recreated Medusa as an angel. Beatrice's dark hair, let loose from its plait, looked limp. She had sat for her... Oh, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. Beatrice's dark hair, let loose from its plait, looked limp. She had sat for her portrait in a royal blue gown with tiny pearls sewn in criss-cross patterns across the bodice. Her puffed sleeves were of an unusual scarlet, embroidered with blue roses that matched the body of the dress. Isabella had to admit that her sister, despite all her other oddities, did have nice taste in clothing, and as was meticulous about her dressmaking as Isabella herself. Yet the rest of her toilette lacked style, and her natural appearance was not the most impressive, at least not at this age. Luckily, the two sisters were not painted together, where their differences could be in sharp relief. I am going to take this beautiful picture back with me to Mantua, Francesco tells Isabella, reaching for her hand, but I cannot decide whether to hang it in a place of great prominence, so that everyone can admire your beauty, or whether I will put it in a private place, where I alone might meditate upon it. It is only 1 year until our wedding, but for me it will seem painfully long. It is thrilling for Isabella to hear these words, which reflect her own thoughts, though she cannot resist interjecting her opinion. If I were you, I would hang it where others can admire it as well. That should add to your meditations, not detract. Why hide a thing of beauty? To think that he can take a piece of her back with him to his castello, which she will soon occupy. Isabella is grateful that in less than 1 year the portrait will soon be back in her possession. She adores collecting beautiful things, and would hate to have a portrait done by a master of a painting lost to her. All that she has collected thus far she will be allowed to take with her into her marriage. The many cameos, the intaglios cut so delicately by Ferrara's jewelers, the trunks painted by famous artists that hold her wardrobe, and the necklaces and belts that she designed with the smiths. Of these she is most proud because they are expressions of herself. Of course, Francesco concedes to the request to display her portrait. Why should I have the pleasure of looking at you myself? Exactly. He had been, thus far, the most delightful of potential husbands. Though he is 23 years to her 15, possessed of superior maturity, over the years of their engagement he has written her at least one letter per season, assuring her that he lives for the day when they will be husband and wife. If word reached him that she was ill, he always sent a fine gift in the form of a perfect pearl pendant, a foggy miniature landscape by a new Flemish painter, or once, when a high fever had held her too long in its grip, a tiny spaniel puppy that licked the fever from her face. Or so she believed. So 1 month might have changed our destinies? Francesco asks. Tell me the story of how I almost was made to live out my life in utter misery, without your companionship. So she tells him how, many years ago, when Isabella was only 6 years old, Ludovico Sforza had sent an ambassador to Ferrara to ask for the hand of Duke Ercole's eldest daughter. Ludovico was a rising star in Italian politics, already the Duke of Bari and the regent to his nephew, Gian Galeazzo, Duke of Milan. Ludovico was thought by many to be the most illustrious young ruler of his day. He did, however, have a reputation for a certain wickedness. But, as Fortuna had it, 1 month prior, the Gonzagas of Mantua, important because of its geographic location between the powerful city-state of Milan and the most serene Republic of Venice, had sent their own emissary to ask for the hand of Isabella. And because an alliance with Mantua was crucial for the welfare and safety of Ferrara, Duke Ercole happily concluded negotiations for Isabella to marry Francesco Gonzaga, who would become Marquis upon the death of his father. The Milanese messenger had to return to Ludovico to ask if the second daughter of Ercole d'Este would do, and the answer came with great swiftness. Yes. Later it was discovered that Ludovico did not mind that Beatrice was only 5 years old and would not be ready for marriage for at least 10 years. He was a supreme ladies' man, and was in no hurry, and indeed perhaps had no particular intention to settle down. I shudder to think how Fortuna might have played her cards differently, and I could have been saddled with an old man like Ludovico, who, goodness, is already almost 40, she says boldly to Francesco. He looks at Beatrice's portrait and Isabella's portrait, and does the thing that he must know makes her whole body quiver, which is to kiss her hand, letting his lips linger 2 seconds, or 3, past propriety. I shudder too, he says. Oh, he was perfect. At the Christmas pageants, for which people came all over Italy, he sat next to the Duke at each performance, complimenting him on his devotion to reviving the theatre. To please the clergy, Ercole always staged a religious tableau or two so they wouldn't complain about his more pagan theatrical endeavors. This year, Ercole chose the Annunciation for the opening pageant, in which a bold player wearing angel wings flew on stage on ropes to announce the Virgin's fate. The following evening they witnessed a reenactment of the birth of Christ in a manger. The court artists had filled the stage with real barnyard animals, and at times the bleating goats drowned out the players' words. Still, everyone agreed that this did not distract from the drama of the tableau, but added realism, since such animals were undoubtedly present at our Lord's birth. After Christmas, and to celebrate the new year of 1490, as well as the beginning of a new decade, the Duke let loose his passion for the sort of theatrical presentations he loved. In the old Palazzo della Ragione, remodeled into a theatre, he presented ancient Latin comedies which he himself translated into Italian, hiring actors, dancers, and musicians from all over Italy. He collaborated with Niccolò da Correggio on a new version of Ovid's Metamorphoses, a lavish production with music, dance, and recitation. Francesco sat with the Duke during the performance, gasping in awe at how convincing the actors were in both behavior and costume as the gods of old, thus proving himself a worthy son-in-law. Isabella did see her betrothed making flirtatious conversations with some of the ladies of the court, which she did not like at all. She had thought that this enticing demeanor of his had been her private reserve, but her fiancé had charmed as fair, and virility too, and some day she reminded herself she would be the happy recipient of all of that. In the meanwhile, her mother, Leonora, counseled her that a woman must always forgive her husband any indulgences before the marriage, for it was natural for an unmarried man to give in to these urges, and besides, it did not do for two innocents to tumble into bed together after a wedding and have to figure out the entire map of love-making. If he carried these proclivities into the marriage, well, a woman could choose to rebel and demand fidelity, or to adjust and remain silent. Either way, the outcome would probably be the same. The man would do whatever he wished, quietly or openly, for that was the nature of men. Some Italian women were getting just as bad, but thanks to our Lord and her own good discipline, Leonora was certain her daughters would not join the ranks of the promiscuous. The women of the house of Este must be above these things. So if Ludovico Sforza had been less interested in making mischief in Milan and more interested in arranging a good marriage for himself, I would be taking home the portrait of Beatrice. Is that what you are telling me? Francesco smiles naughtily at his valet, as his valet shakes out the thick muslin he will use to wrap the painting of Isabella. That is correct, she says, as she watches her image disappear behind the heavy white cloth. The court records show that there were a mere 30 days between the arrival of the ambassador from Mantua and the arrival of the ambassador of Milan. Then your family concluded the business of our marriage rather quickly. Perhaps they were afraid you would receive no more offers, he teased. Sir, she exclaims. Might he really believe that? Have you so little regard for me? Francesco quickly takes her aside, away from the ears of his servants. It was God himself pushing your father to hurry because he ordained this union from heaven. You are not meant for Ludovico of Milan or anyone else but me. That is what our marriage is going to be, Isabella. Heaven. How does he always know exactly what to say to please her? He is right. Marriage with any other man is unthinkable. How grateful is she that she will spend her life with the man she loves, while her sister must go live in the strange city of Milan, in a huge fortress where her husband pleasures himself with the company of other women. What about you, my dear Isabella? Do you not wish the ambassador from Mantua had slipped from his horse, or had run into terrible weather, or a band of thieves, or something else to detain him so that you could be going to Ludovico? He intends to rule a great portion of the European continent, you know. Oh, how can you suggest that? Ludovico is old and terrible. He has no interest in marriage. Beatrice's portrait will probably be eaten by worms before he sends someone to collect it. She leans as close to her fiancé as she dares to share her secret. It is very bad, sir, what has happened. Please do not betray my confidence. My father had no higher wish than to marry his daughters in a double wedding, but Ludovico refused, making some excuse for why he could not marry next year. Messer Trotti, our ambassador to Milan, has pushed him as hard as he dares to set a firm date into the future, but Ludovico will not. They say he is in love with a woman named Cecilia, who is very beautiful, and that he holds her up as a wife in his court. But her family is of no use to him politically, and therefore he cannot marry her. My poor sister! Do you think I would trade places with her? Francesco does not seem at all surprised by this news. Gossip in Italy is being impossible to suppress. Perhaps the entire country knows of Ludovico's slight to Beatrice and to the Este family. Francesco does, however, take advantage of being this close to his beloved with no eyes upon them. He moves his lips to her neck. He doesn't kiss her exactly, but takes in a deep breath, as if he wishes to carry her scent with him back to Mantua. He runs his nose the length of her neck from the bottom of her ear to the nape, breathing her in. Then he pulls away, whispering, "That will have to linger in our memories until our wedding day." While she is still recovering, she realizes that he and his valet and her portrait are gone, and she will not see him again for 3 months. to Ludovico Sforza, Duke of Bari, Regent of Milan. From Leonardo the Florentine, Master of Engineering, Weaponry, and Painting. Most illustrious Lord, having now seen the creations of all those who call themselves masters and inventors of the instruments of war, and finding that these inventions are no greater in any respect than those in common use, I am emboldened to write to you to acquaint you with my secrets, and to offer to demonstrate at any convenient time all those assertions which are recorded below. 1. I have designs for bridges that are light, strong, and easily carried to pursue and defeat the enemy. I also have plans for destroying the enemy's bridges and siege equipment. 2. I know how to cut off water from trenches, and how to construct an infinite number of movable shelters, scalding ladders and other instruments crucial to the enterprise of a siege. 3. I have plans for destroying every fortress or other stronghold unless it has been founded upon rock. 4. I have designs for making cannon, very convenient and easy to transport, with which to hurl small stones like a rain of hail, causing great terror, loss, and confusion to the enemy. 5. I can make armored vehicles, safe and unassailable, which will infiltrate the ranks of the enemy. 6. I can make cannon, mortars, and light ordnance of very beautiful and useful shapes, quite different from those already in use. 7. I can supply catapults and other engines of wonderful efficiency for slinging great stones and other instruments of destruction. 8. Also, in times of peace, I will prove myself as adept as anyone else in architecture and in the construction of buildings, and in conducting water from one place to another. 9. I can execute sculpture in marble, bronze, or clay, and also painting, in which my work will stand comparison with anyone else, whoever he may be. 10. Finally, I would undertake the work of making the bronze horse, which shall honor the memory of your father and the illustrious house of Sforza. If any of the aforesaid claims seem impossible, I offer myself as ready to demonstrate them in whatever place shall please your excellency, to whom I humbly commend myself. Leonardo the Florentine, 1483. The New Year, 1490, in the city of Ferrara. Beatrice's portrait sits alone for weeks in Leonora's studiolo, and the family practically goes mad trying not to mention it. Isabella takes pity on Beatrice and asks Niccolo da Correggio to set some of his sonnets to song so that she might sing them for her sister and cheer her up. That the poet Niccolo is hopelessly in love with Isabella and carries out her every wish as if she were doing him the favor by asking him is common knowledge. He has now set 15 sonnets to the lute. Every evening after dinner, Isabella plays one or two for her sister, followed by a game of cards, at which Beatrice excels. Isabella either lets Beatrice win, or Beatrice wins fairly, and then Isabella rushes to her room so she can enjoy in privacy the memory of Francesco's breath on her neck. When she becomes bored with entertaining Beatrice, she sends her pet dwarf, Matilda, to make Beatrice laugh by lifting up her skirts and chasing Beatrice's greyhound puppy around the room, shooting little squirts of pee in his direction. Matilda reports that Beatrice has laughed at no jokes, but cannot stifle her delight at this routine. I ran after that little dog till I was bone dry and out of breath. The princess finally passed out on her bed, and the servants had to come in and clean so she wouldn't have to wake up to the stink of piss. God bless her little soul. Isabella has also become very devout in recent weeks, attending Mass daily, much to her mother's happy surprise. She does not reveal the reason, but it is this. She gives thanks to God for the celestial secretary who arranged the schedules of all parties, so that Francesco Gonzaga's ambassador from Mantua arrived in the nick of time to save her from a betrothal to Ludovico, who would have humiliated her, as he is doing to her sister. Isabella knows that Beatrice inquires daily whether their father has received correspondence from Ambassador Trotti in Milan. Finally, on one of the frigid last days of January, Trotti returns from Milan and asks for an immediate audience with the Duke and his family. The family, minus the three little brothers, Alfonso, Ferrante, and Ippolito, I am going to butcher these Italian names, oh Lord, who were already sent to bed, gather in the small drawing room that is the easiest to warm to a crisp by its large fireplace. The ceiling is not very high, and the room has an intimate feel, conducive for spilling gossip, for that was the main product of the Ferrarese ambassadors brought back from their missions. Trotti is as puffed up as a pig's bladder with his news. Impatient to get through the small talk and the niceties, he turns to Duke Ercole. Your Excellency, how I wish you had been there to see it. It was the most magnificent spectacle in the world. All of Italy is talking of it. The family looks at him mutely. So, you have not heard? No one says a word. Ercole and Leonora, practiced at receiving the most devastating news without reaction, remain as inscrutable as ever, while Isabella guesses that Trotti will announce some magnificent ceremony at which Ludovico has married his mistress. Beatrice anticipates his words like a poor starved dog awaiting outside a tavern for scraps. The Masque of the Planets? The Feast of Paradise? Trotti looks at them as if their very knowledge of the Italian language is in question. Don't be surprised if you soon receive dozens of letters describing the wonders. It was the most magical, spectacular thing I have ever witnessed, and all designed by the painter and engineer Leonardo the Florentine. Picture this: a gigantic dome built under the ceiling of a great hall. All night long there was music and dancing and processions of gigantic murals of Italy's most glorious battles, from the days of the Romans all the way to the days of Ludovico's father's great victories for Milan. The scenes were so detailed and so gloriously violent, I felt as if I was thrown into the midst of battle. Then, when the bells rang at midnight, Ludovico presented himself costumed as an Oriental pasha. I must say, he looked every bit the magician. He ordered the music stopped and the curtain to rise. Suddenly, all the foliage fell away from the dome, revealing it to be a replication of the sky itself. The entire sphere was gilded, a great golden universe, if you can fathom it. Live players representing all 7 of the planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac began to orbit, exactly as they do in the sky. Everything was lit by dozens of torches. The players, each dressed according to character, Mars, Venus, Neptune, and the like, spun around the sky so many times it made us all dizzy. Then, one by one, they floated in front of the stage and delivered fine orations. They hung in the air as if by magic. No one knows how it was done, but afterward everyone crowded around the Florentine, who would not reveal any of his secret means. Silence. They say that in ancient times the sculptor Phidias alone was given knowledge of the exact image of the gods, which he revealed to man. I believe that Leonardo has been thus gifted. More silence. It must occur to Trotti that Beatrice and her family have waited for weeks for news of her pending marriage, and here he is describing a theatrical presentation. Isabella, for her part, is no longer thinking on Beatrice's humiliation, but is caught up in the magnificence of the scenario and wants to hear more. Well, everyone's talking about it, Trotti says with a defensive sniff. And to what purpose was this festa held? Duke Ercole finally asks. Isabella sees Beatrice holding her breath. It was to celebrate the anniversary of last year's marriage between Ludovico's 20-year-old nephew, Gian Galeazzo, the young Duke of Milan, and his wife, your cousin Isabel of the House of Aragon. That was the intention, but of course it was held entirely to raise esteem for Ludovico. He holds these pageantries allegedly to glorify his nephew, but there is no question that he intends to keep the boy out of the business of government entirely and, as soon as possible, steal the title of Duke for himself. He looks at Beatrice. By the way, he likes to be called Il Moro. Does he truly look like a Moor? Beatrice asks. You will have to judge for yourself, Trotty says, and Isabella assumes that he is being the diplomat. Ludovico must be called Il Moro because he is dark and savage like the barbarians she's seen in paintings. Those men who live in tents, cut the throats of their enemies, and eschew the teachings of our Lord. Poor Beatrice! Imagine having to allow such a man entrance into your bed. And of the wedding? Asks the Duchess. Il Moro expresses his deepest regrets that he is unable to gratify you on the date proposed early next year, but he pledges to send alternate dates by his own messenger in the coming months. There is still no hope, then, of a double wedding of my daughters? Asks the Duchess. Il Moro repeats that his duties preclude the celebration of the marriage at that time. He asks for your patience. I am losing faith in this man's promises, says the Duke. Your Excellency, it is my opinion at this time that this one may be worth waiting for. Beatrice shrugs, curtsies, and asks to be allowed to go to bed. But Isabella's curiosity has been piqued by the description of the spectacle at Milan. A thorough interrogation of Trotti is in order, though the hour is late. She has heard stories about the Florentine Leonardo, called Magistro throughout Italy for his innovations in painting. So now he is in the service of Ludovico, Beatrice's future husband. Beatrice's possible future husband. Pity that the opportunity to be painted by so great a master will be wasted on Beatrice, who cares nothing for posing. How is it that the Florentine came to serve the regent of Milan? Isabella asks. The story goes that Prince Lorenzo the Magnificent insulted the Magistro by giving the commission to do a mural of the execution of the Pazzi conspirators to Sandro Botticelli. Leonardo wanted the commission badly, and had submitted beautiful drawings, or so they say, of the hanging men, so lifelike that one felt as if they were present at the scene. Then, to add to the injury, Lorenzo sent Florence's best painters, Botticelli, Signorelli, Ghirlandaio, and Perugino, to paint Pope Sixtus's chapel in Rome, but not Leonardo. Imagine! Oh, Lorenzo doesn't always see what's right in front of him, says Ercole. He's overly impressed with manners and formality and the reading of Greek. He is quite capable of treating a great genius like a laborer if the man has not studied classical literature. Bravo to the Magistro for going over to Ludovico. Milan, not Florence, is the new Athens, and Ludovico its Pericles. That is why we are putting up with the Duke's procrastination over this marriage. Isabella has noticed that though her father pays public tribute to Lorenzo, he is not so generous to him in private dialogue. True enough, Trotti says, building on Ercole's comment, Leonardo must have known that he had to escape Lorenzo's service so that he could play Pheidias to Ludovico's Pericles. So he made a magnificent silver lute in the shape of a horse's head, and he convinced Lorenzo that he should present the thing to Ludovico at Milan as a gift from the city of Florence. Leonardo appeared at Il Moro's court with his exquisite lute and sang in his exquisite voice. All of that is true. Then he secretly slipped Il Moro a letter listing all of his qualifications, and so it was accomplished. Leonardo enchanted the Duke with his beauty and his voice and the playing of his own compositions, and Leonardo never returned to Florence. He is beautiful as well, the Florentine? Isabella's interest heightens. So beautiful that he cannot find a model as intriguing as himself. They say he has built an octagon of mirrors so that he might view himself from all angles and paint himself in profile. And have you seen the painting? I have seen others, Trotti says, tantalizing both of the elder Estes and the young one, all of whom he knows have a mania for collecting. What have you seen? Anything we might procure? Or should we approach him with a commission? Asks the Duchess. Isabella realizes that in a few months she will be Marchesa of Mantua, who, like her mother, will have her own allowance to purchase art. If she wants to commission a painting by a genius, she will have agents and ambassadors of her own to conduct the negotiations. Unfortunately, he is notorious for not completing his commissions. The monks of San Donato in Florence are suing him over an incomplete Adoration of the Magi, though they display it with pride in their chapel, but most things he leaves undone. So it goes, says Ercole. Men of genius rarely behave conventionally. But Isabella and Leonora have no intention of giving up. What have you seen that is completed? Isabella asks. Is it up for purchase? I shudder to think, my daughter, that when you are Marchesa of Mantua, I will have to compete with you over these items, Leonora says with a mixture of pride and acceptance. Trotti sits quietly, unusual for him. He looks at the Duke, who merely looks back. It's rather indelicate, he says. Our daughter is about to become a bride and a Marchesa. I believe you can speak openly in her presence, replies the Duke. I have seen a magnificent portrait done by the Magistro of Cecilia Gallerani, Ludovico's mistress. It is completed, and it is not for sale. He lowers his eyes. The conversation is not pursued. Isabella is promptly dismissed to her chamber. She leaves the room humbly and without protestation, because long ago she discovered a wonderful secret. If she turns the corner discreetly, she can linger against the wall, out of sight, and hear everything her parents say inside their favorite room, in which they seem to hold their most intimate conversations. So Ludovico's attentions are still solidly affixed to this woman? Ercole asks. She is regarded as a wife at court, Your Excellency. Do you think he will honor the betrothal with Beatrice? He must. He has proposed the idea of marriage to the Gallerani woman many times to his advisers, and each time the proposal is rejected. She is a woman of beauty and brilliance, but her family brings nothing in terms of strengthening Milan, either politically or militarily. There is danger from Rome and from Venice. There is great danger from Naples. There is danger from France. Losing your allegiance to any of the others would be deadly. He will honor the commitment, but at a time convenient for himself. That is how he does all things. Messer Trotti, speak candidly, says the Duchess. Are we sentencing our daughter to a lifetime of misery? Your Excellency, Milan is a marvel. Ludovico has summoned the most brilliant artists and architects and engineers and craftsmen in Italy. The finest minds in Europe are now at the universities of Milan and Pavia, thanks to Ludovico's invitation of intellectual freedom and high salaries that are tax-free. In many ways, he is an enlightened man. In others, he's a snake. But he is not unkind. Though he will probably not love Madonna Beatrice, he will treat her generously. At any rate, my eyes will be constantly fixed upon his affairs. The Duchess looked at her husband. I fear for Beatrice's happiness. She is not as stable as Isabella and not entirely in control of her emotions. She will have to learn to be so, answers the Diamond in the icy tone that earned him his nickname. Beatrice is not daft. She is smart and capable. Trotti shakes his head. Your Excellencies, I say this with all respect for every member of your family, and the high honor due you, but it is a pity that the marriage contracts cannot be switched. Do you believe that we should renege on the contract? Asks the Duke. That will leave us with only remote marital ties to Milan. Isabella hears the impatience in her father's voice. Trotti continues. Il Moro will make himself the Duke of Milan. He will never be satisfied with being the regent to the young Duke, Gian Galeazzo, who is weak and incompetent. Il Moro feeds the boy's vices steadily, as one feeds one's favorite pets. Gian Galeazzo has weaknesses for wine and for boys with pretty faces. Il Moro sends him an endless stream of both. His wife, Isabel of Aragon, complains loudly of still being a virgin. Of course, Ludovico keeps the boy in a dissolute state, all the while ruling Milan, making alliances with foreign powers, building the army, consolidating his powers, and waiting for the day the boy will drop dead of decadence. What does any of this have to do with our daughter? Asks Ercole. Madonna Beatrice is a lovely girl, but, how shall we say, somewhat flighty. Madonna Isabella has an accomplished and astute mind, and already at her young age the judgment necessary to be the Duchess of a world power, not to mention the Moor loves blonde hair and a womanly figure. Madonna Isabella would be a formidable rival for Cecilia Gallerani, who was also a very brilliant woman, and like Madonna Isabella, has the intellect of a man. The Duke is silent. Isabella wonders, fears, that he will begin to intrigue with Trotti to make her forsake Francesco and marry the horrible and cunning Moor. The Duchess sighs. There is nothing to be done. Isabella's betrothal to Gonzaga was negotiated years ago. At this point, it is a love match as well as a consolidation of the powers of two ruling families. Trotti sighs too. It's just a pity that the brilliant daughter is going to the provincial, and the one who loves horses as much as the provincial is going to a true man of learning in a city like Milan. Isabella has been listening to this conversation, holding her breath. She tiptoes away, slowly opening the door to the colonnade and walking outside. The air is freezing cold, and she has no cloak to keep her warm. She leans her back against the wall, breathing in the frigid atmosphere. She would like to murder that gossip-monger Trotti for calling her beloved a provincial. Francesco is intelligent and masculine and worldly and courtly. She feels disloyal just having heard what was said about him. At the same time, there is another conversation going on in her mind, battering her love for Francesco and her joy in anticipating her life with him. This conversation she cannot stifle. Her sister is going to preside over a kingdom in which its ruler might achieve the immortality of Pericles, where an artist the caliber of Phidias is building monuments as spectacular and perhaps as eternal as the Parthenon. Is this not what she, Isabella, was born for? To reign over one of the most powerful realms in the world, to sit for the genius Leonardo, to supplant this beautiful Cecilia Gallerani in the famous Castello Sforzaco, in Il Moro's heart, to take her place among the immortals who are creating this kingdom of mythical proportions, whose monuments and structures and artistic achievements and legends will live on and on long after their bodies have turned to dust. These are challenges for Isabella, not the wild and naive Beatrice. Has Isabella been a fool all along, thinking that Fortuna has been on her side? What irony is this, to find out these things now that she is in love with her betrothed, now that nothing can be done. What if Isabella had been cheated out of her true destiny by chance? Can one challenge Fortuna? Would that be the same as trying to challenge God? Even if there is a way, would she dare? But, she reminds herself, the Ferraris have always believed in miracles. Wasn't that what she was saying to Francesco? If God made manifest the body and blood of his Son in St. Mary's Church, surely he would not allow anything so terrible as missing out on one's own destiny to happen to a princess of Ferrara. Surely. She calls upon her sensibilities to save her. After all, Ludovico is old. He is 23 years older than Beatrice. By the time he marries her, if he ever decides to honor his contract, he will have an old man's musty smell. His skin will be hanging off his bones. His flesh will be decrepit, and his gait bent and crooked. He may even be too old to perform his marital duties. And Beatrice will die childless, whereas Francesco is virile and young and has eyes only for Isabella. The two of them will make gallant sons who will have the best qualities of the Gonzagas and of the Estes. There will be no scheming decadence in Mantua, no evil regent contributing to the ruin of the true ruler of the realm in order to steal his title. Yes, surely Isabella will be better off after all. She and Francesco are noble people who will rule a noble society. Il Moro and the court of Milan are corrupt. And if it comes to pass that Fortuna has played some clever trick on her, then she will take her destiny into her own hands. She will know what to do to remedy Fortuna's mistake. She has often wondered if Fortuna is in God's jurisdiction, or reigns over a realm on her own. Though she is certain that this thought is heresy, she cannot help but to ponder it. She has been taught that God is, was, and always shall be. But this singular idea of Fortuna has survived centuries of the Church's doctrine. God's power is omniscient, but Fortuna is left over from the meddling Olympian gods, so interested in worldly affairs. While Zeus and Hera and the like are only alive today in paintings, sculptures, myths, and the ruins of antiquities, Fortuna is still active in the daily intercourse of human events. Isabella is not alone in this belief, she knows. Doesn't every kitchen maid, every soldier, shout please and gratitude to Fortuna? God, Fortuna, one or both will take care of her, or she will take care of herself. It's as her devout father has always advised. Believe passionately in our Lord. Pay tribute to his greatness day and night. Build cathedrals to his glory. Have faith in his will, but don't always rely on him to do your bidding. All right. We didn't get very far in this evening, but that's okay. That is okay. All right. Hour and a half passed. What are we thinking so far of the story? Like with the last two books that I've read, I'm going to apologize. I don't speak Italian. I don't speak Latin. At some point, I will not be speaking French, but I will endeavor to try and speak them all as best I can. I probably will butcher any and all of those languages, so if you speak French, Italian, Latin, I'm sorry. This is going to be a bit rough when it comes to names, places, phrases. So we'll just bear with me and be as kind as you possibly can be. So, Leonardo Swans for the evening. Karen Essex is the author of this book. I think she's actually got a few other books out as well. I'm trying to think. Maybe they're not listed in here. Let's see here. Two acclaimed biographical novels, Cleopatra and Pharaoh. Those are two separate titles, Cleopatra and Pharaoh. So she's very much a historical fiction fanatic, so I like that about her. Actually, Ismail, you missed the cats. There was a cat earlier. When I put this up on my YouTube, you'll probably see like a tail kind of like going across the screen, and you'll probably see me lift a cat off the screen. But there were cats earlier, but then I kicked them out. Kind of. They kicked themselves out. So, all right, guys. I'm off for the evening. I will see you all on Friday, same time, 8 to 9:30. Leonardo Swans. So, I hope you all have a great night, and I will see you on Friday.